Hello, this is Jules. This is just a quick video to explain a concept that I use a lot in talking about consciousness progression, and that is lines of development. Sometimes I call them strands of development or threads of development. I believe Ken Wilber uses the term lines of development, so that's why I'm using it here, because I think that's becoming the standard. This is another video about consciousness progression. So if this colorful squiggly line does not look familiar to you, then I recommend checking out the overview videos on spiral dynamics. I'll put links to those in the description below. So lines of development. This is a concept that is foundational to understanding consciousness development, understanding shadows and shadow work, etc. It is a very useful concept. I'll start by asking the question, when we're developing our consciousness, what is it that we're actually developing? Lots of things. Basically, anything that develops your mind in any way, and I'm using a very broad definition of mind. So this could include working on different areas of your life, like health, relationships, sexuality, creativity. It could include different intelligences, like cognitive intelligence, emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, etc. It could also include any skill, so artistic skill, math, music, writing, French, botany, computer programming, swimming, leadership, anything really. The only kinds of things that I can think of that consciousness development doesn't explicitly directly include would be physical development, like as your body, especially this is noticeable when we're children, our bodies change quite a bit, and I would say that that has a relationship with consciousness development, but I wouldn't explicitly include that in consciousness development. If you can think of something else that doesn't fit under consciousness development and want to comment in the comment section below, I would be very interested in having that discussion. So when we're actually developing our consciousness, what that looks like is all these different lines are moving along the same trajectory. Each one is moving along the spiral. And I just drew this as though they all move at the same rate simultaneously, which I'm fairly certain is impossible to accomplish. What actually happens is in our lives is we develop one or more of these at a time. For example, you could be developing your emotional intelligence and your communication skills and the area of your life called relationships. You could be developing all three of those simultaneously. You could also be developing your creativity and your artistic skills, like your technical skills in art, simultaneously. So you can see how multiple lines could be directly related to each other, and we do experience that as we're developing ourselves. In tier 1, so everything that I just described is how development feels in tier 1. But something shifts in this line that I didn't draw here between tier 1 and tier 2. And it looks something like this. Roundabout yellow stage, this magical thing starts to occur where you start to realize that as you're developing one skill, say dance, it seems to as you're mastering this skill and you're getting a very deep, complex understanding of it as you do in yellow stage, you begin to see how it relates to other areas of your life that are seemingly unconnected. Like you might start to notice how relationships are like a dance, and you might see the reverse where you see the dynamics of relationships in your dancing. And this can happen across any skills, any skills, any areas of your life, any intelligences that seem, even if they seem completely unrelated to each other in tier 1, in tier 2 you start to experience how they are related to each other and how they affect each other. As you move along further into, say, turquoise stage, you start to experience that they are intricately connected to each other, and you start to see how it's not just a few of these skills that are related to each other, it's all of them. And you start to feel the resonance among all these different areas of your life and how they affect each other. And by the time you get to coral stage, you start to see that you actually can't develop any individual line of development without developing the other ones. So it becomes, you could see this as a glass half full or glass half empty kind of situation, where in order to develop one line, you have to develop everything else. And that could feel quite daunting. Or you could see it as, well, and or you could see it both ways. You could also see it as whenever you develop one thing, you are developing all of the rest of them, which can feel very powerful. And then as you get further along in tier 2, you begin to experience, especially by the time you get to, say, plum stage, you begin to experience that these aren't actually separate at all. They are, in fact, the same dynamics repeated. And then by the time you get to aubergine, you realize, oh, actually, I am only developing one thing this entire time, and that is consciousness. So when I'm referring to lines of development or strands of development or threads of development, however I happen to say it in any given video, this is what I'm referring to. I'm referring to all of these different lines that we develop in our lives. And this will come up when I'm talking about shadows and shadow work, for example, because these lines don't progress at the same rate, and one or more lines can get stuck in earlier stages, and that's how shadows happen. I'll talk about that more later in videos dedicated to shadows and shadow work. This is also helpful for understanding one's center of gravity in development, where you experience being, for example, mostly in green stage, but you also notice that in certain areas of your life or certain skills or something like that, you feel like you're more in yellow stage, or you feel like you're more in orange stage, or maybe farther back in red or something like that. And this is why. It's because you might have most of your lines developed to a green stage, but then you have a few that are still back in orange or blue or red or purple or whatever. And you might have a few that are ahead of you where you've developed certain lines further, say into yellow or even turquoise. So this is a very important concept when talking about consciousness progression. So if you have any questions about this, put them in the comments below, and I will see you next time.